Here's what we're gonna make. For me, that's close enough to our reference, which is What's up, everybody? This is Oscar from Underdog. How you doing? Today what I want to propose that we do is we do a little study of FJAAK. Have you ever heard of FJAAK? If you're into a particular type of techno, you've definitely heard of them. They are very known from bangers such as and as a little bit of an homage or a love letter to this style, I just want us to have a look at the ingredients, the recipe list for something like this. Here's what we're gonna make. For me, that's close enough to our reference, which is here. Let me give you a little bit of a rundown of the recipe of what's in there. So the FJAAK cookbook. The FJAAK recipe. What have we got? In the low end, we've got a straightforward 4 on the floor kick pattern with a very strong atonal rumble. I made 4 candidates for this before I was happy, so don't freak out if you don't get the kick right immediately. It takes a little bit of trial and iteration. My first attempt was like this. My second attempt was like this. Hard. My third attempt was like this. Deep. And my fourth attempt was this. And this is the one that I'm going to keep in the end. And how do you make a kick and a rumble? Well, I'm glad you asked. I just so happen to have made a perfect video for you right here. Why don't you go check that one out? This particular rumble is very similar to the intermediate level rumble there, which is a kick into a parallel effects chain. And in that parallel effects chain, there's just a reverb that's been low passed, monoed, sidechain compressed, equalizer to scoop out some of the mids, there's a decapitator to add some crunch, a limiter to squeeze the whole thing together, and then an EQ8 because it was a little bit clicky on small speakers. Particularly that last EQ8, I found that an interesting move because without it's like this, which seems nice, but it sounds a bit clicky and thin. And when you push back that transient a little bit into the mix, everything feels a bit more massive on all sound systems. It sounds big everywhere. So that's the kick and the atonal rumble. Fairly straightforward, but one thing that I'm going to have to mention here immediately is that if you look at the master for a FJAAK track, look at this Pro L, for example. Look at the LUFS meter on this Pro L. It is -6.5. -6.5 LUFS. That is absolutely bonkers. That's bonkers. That's so compressed. There's almost no dynamic range. And I want to tell you that this is appropriate in the genre. So whenever you're taking mixing advice from people, you're going to hear all sorts of perspectives, from compress everything to don't compress anything. And a lot of people are going to say how important dynamic range is. You're going to read that a lot online, but realize that if all the tracks in your genre have a certain amount of compression on them, your track probably wants to have a similar amount of compression on it. So whatever you're producing, aim for an LUFS that's equivalent to your reference tracks. Now in this case, trying to aim for -6.5 is kind of insane. I'm going to squish my one down to -8, -7, something like that. But once I reach that level, I'm already pretty confident that my track is going to be loud and vivid the whole time. And of course, the most challenging element to compress is going to be your kick and your rumble. So that's the reason that I've got a limiter already just on my kick and the rumble before it even goes to the master. See, my kick and rumble, I've compressed it, oh my god, to -6 already. So I've turned my kick and rumble really into a sausage that stays at a very stable volume the whole time. Anyway, let's keep moving. What else is there in here? Well, first of all, there's a whole bunch of percussion that functions as a group. And in that percussion, there are some toms, there's a snare, there's some hi-hats and a little shaker. And they kind of function as a group because they always come in and out at the same time. And particularly the toms and the snare, they focus on something called syncopation. If the kick and the rumble is the pulse, then the toms and the snare have a rhythmic motif that contrasts with that pulse, creating syncopation, pulling against it. And that creates a danceable groove. The perk pattern is also quite short. It's every 2 beats, so not every 4 beats. It repeats every 2 beats, which gives a very kind of loopy and hypnotic feeling. And for the perks in my track, this is what I came up with. There's some 909 toms doing something like this, put together with the kick. provide this syncopation in the low end by stressing some weak beats. Then similar story with the snare, just a single weak beat, strongly emphasized. And then less syncopated, there's this hi-hat like that, and a shaker. It's barely audible, only on headphones do you really hear it. To give it a little bit of texture and air to the whole thing, so we're not only focusing on low frequencies, there's also something tasty for your ears to hang on to in the high frequencies. So because there's this strong syncopation in the groove, it actually reaffirms how nice the pulse is, how nice the kick is. And that's how you keep a very boring kick really interesting for a long time. And we're not even using anything like polymeters here or anything. Nothing too fancy. Then on top of this percussion group, there are 2 layers of what I call functional highs. This is just a hi-hat and a ride that alternate a little bit between each other, and they give a bit of high energy. They pull the track a bit towards the high energy. So we're thinking about something like this. I call this up hat because it's always on the upbeat. Or some people call that the offbeat. I call that the upbeat. That's fine. And here's a ride doing the exact same. So together you get this. And so you can turn these on and off to create sort of energy levels in the groove. And another thing that creates energy levels, by the way, is having some kind of low pass filter on this perk group. See, you can give that feeling that everything is closing, even though the kick stays stable, just by having this perk group open up and close. Tasty, right? And we add back in the functional highs, and this becomes so dancey. That's amazing. Now that we've got all our energy infrastructure into place, now let's add in some rave sounds, something that people are going to be able to sing along with as the lead sound of the song, but without going into melodic territory. What we're thinking of more is sounds that are classic in house and rave stabs and things like this. I purposely did not overthink this. I think the point of this kind of techno is to move with the vibe and not overproduce and not get too intellectual about things. So I just went to an old school sample CD and I found this riff. Okay, and so I just drop that into a sampler and I just play some notes like that. Close enough, right? Let's add in some elements one by one. Where is that pulse? Come on. Okay, cool. Then in our track, at some point, that's going to become a little bit lonely. Then we're going to add in a secondary sound, which is a bit like something vocal. It's gangsta. So, add in a whole bunch of reverb. I love putting simple sounds like this through Guitar Rig and then just flicking around until I like the character of what comes out. I've been finding Guitar Rig really is like an instant vibe machine recently, so that's pretty fun. I have no affiliation with Native Instruments though. So, make sure that both of these are programmed in a way that they leave space for each other, so that when they play at the same time, they create something that feels a bit like a call and response. So it's almost like one musical motif. If you've ever heard of the concept of hocketing, that's kind of like that, where you take a melody and split it up over several instruments. It kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like like it's one melody, one pattern all together. And the key to that is to just leave space between the two motifs so that they can answer to each other. So here we go. Together, pretty good, pretty good. And then the only other thing that I would add is maybe put a string at the top. It's like, I call that a house string. It's kind of like a violin, but it can be a synthesizer, it can be anything, but it's at the top of your composition. So this can just kind of swell in and swell out over time. It's something nice and stable for people to hold on to as the elements below kind of churn. I don't think I sound designed this one that well, but it's okay. It's just an example. And so there you go. That's my FJAAK cookbook. You can screenshot this and print it off, hang it on your wall next to your Underdog Rumbles poster. Don't overthink this type of music. Make sure to just feel it. Use less elements, but focus on the sound design and the groove of those few elements, and squash the end result all the way down to -7 LUFS. Mixing engineers hate him. one trick the mixing engineers don't want you to know. Do this at your own risk, obviously. And maybe think about doing it on a sound system where you can really hear the impact that you're having on the audio when you're squishing it. Anyway, I hope you got something out of that. If you want to learn from me in a more systematic way, follow my Foundations Level 1 or Foundations Level 2 course. Leave a comment to show me some love, like the video, and until next time, stay producing, be good to each other, and take care. Bye-bye.